Rolling Mills is Miss Geisha. She must be, oh, there she is back there. J.O.J. is Vicky Hollingsworth Moore. MLK is Nicole Johnson, and she has taken on the task to be the president of the Northwest Club. Lakewood is Bertha Robinson. Is Bertha here? Okay. Highlands is Pearl Hunter. Dawson is Anthony Berry. There's a man on the road. And Rolling Hills is Dorothy Ewing. And she still may be outside. Now, you do not have to have a child to participate in the PTA. PTA is about anyone who loves children and desires the best for them. But I would love the community to support the Northwest Cluster as well as your individual PTAs, because when I'm in meetings, they always ask me how many PTA members do you have in your district. And to some communities, that means to strengthen the support that these schools have. So I need Ms. Cole and Ms. Johnson and Mr. Berry, when they speak, they'll be able to say that we have 100% PTA and we represent the voices of this community. So I would love to have you there. They would love to have you. If you want to volunteer, see one of these ladies and the gentlemen and listen to our meeting. It's very informative. Mayor Ballard, nice to see you back there. And our Councilman Richard Showers is here. And my school board member, Mike Cover, District 5. Stand up there and see what you look like, Mike. Dave Blair wanted to extend his apologies because he's been called out of town for business. But we will proceed with the program as printed.
Good evening. I am so pleased with tonight's turnout. That tells me that we are all concerned about our community and most importantly, our children. Thank you to the Huntsville City School Board members and distinguished guests for taking time to be here. We appreciate your support. With that said, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker of the night, Dr. Casey Wardynski.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for coming. Tonight what I want to do is touch on some highlights from the past year in terms of key accomplishments that our schools have made and our students have made, and then talk a little bit about the future of Huntsville City Schools, and specifically with regard to schools that would lead into Johnson High School and schools in this part of our town. So first, touching on accomplishments. The system began a digital conversion, which means we're moving from paper to the same sort of technology that folks use in the office, that they use in the business place, and that your children will need to be masters of to earn high-wage positions in industry. Long noted in our country has been a digital divide between folks who had computing technology and access to computers at home and folks who didn't. Well, we don't need our children to be on the wrong side of that divide. And so Huntsville City School now provides every third grader through 12th grader a laptop. And those laptops have a market value of about $1,600. We didn't pay that for them, but that's what they're worth. And they're connected up to a digital curriculum that now provides immediate feedback. In other words, when your students are working in math, they don't have to wait to turn in their paper and wait a few days to get it graded to get an answer about did they know how to approach the material or not. The minute they're done, they get immediate feedback about was this question answered properly or not, and if not, what would the right answer look like and how would I go about getting that answer. So that's very important in mathematics. As you can imagine, it's equally important in reading. And so from the beginning all the way through 12th grade, we're providing these resources, which the rest of the country is following our lead now. Very shortly, we're going to learn that a town with 800,000 students is doing what we're doing. The state of Florida is doing what we're doing. The country of Uruguay is doing what we're doing. Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine. And within about 5 years, most of the school systems in the country will be headed in this direction. The state of Alabama has already decided that from now on, the key tests we administer to students in high school will be administered on their computers. So we were in a great position this spring to do that. The rest of the states struggled a little bit, but our kids finished their testing in about 2 45-minute periods for each of the core tests that they had to take. So this curriculum's networked, which means it's always improving. Unlike a paper textbook, which if it's printed with mistakes in it, those mistakes are there for the next 7 to 12 years while we keep that book. This curriculum always improves, just like the other stuff you see on the internet, from iTunes to eBay to all the different things we look at on the internet. Well, the other important thing is it's now all lined up with making sure our kids are ready for college and career. And that's the Common Core, or in Alabama, what we call the Alabama Career and College Ready Standards, that you might have heard about in newspapers and seen a little bit about on TV. Those standards are critical because at every grade level, 3 through 12, we're now able to measure how are we doing in terms of getting kids ready for their careers and to succeed in college so they don't have to remediate that first year in college. So all these things are now lined up, and Huntsville's the first major school system in the United States to be able to totally take advantage of it. Next. Why are we doing it? Well, quite simply, because the world's changed a lot, and the world will continue to change, and it's probably going to change at a faster and faster rate. This graphic shows time on the horizontal axis, so there on the left was 1860, and there on the right is the year 2000. And up and down is the number of new patents that are granted in our country every year. So you know these guys over at the arsenal, they're always creating new information, new technologies, and when they do that, they want to protect it, so they write a patent on it. Well, patents are really a shorthand way of keeping track of how much new knowledge is created in our country. And you can see that blue line was how much new knowledge was created every year. And it sort of sloped upward, but it was pretty predictable. Tomorrow looked like today, yesterday wasn't much different than today. And so the world was very linear. The future looked a lot like the past. And that was true up until about 1980, 1990, and then things changed a lot. The internet came online, we all began computing, folks used computers at work, and the amount of knowledge created in our country grew exponentially. And you can see that red line there and the blue lines all went pretty much vertical. That means the world's changing at a very quick rate now. And we can see that all over the place. You can see the kind of companies that we talk about today. Many of them didn't exist 10 years ago. Who had heard of companies like Google 10 or 15 years ago? Nobody, and yet they're one of the biggest companies in the world today. Companies like Kodak, we knew when we were kids, they don't exist anymore. They're gone. So we have to prepare our kids that come what may, good companies, bad companies, companies that come, companies that go, they're going to have the ability to be employed in good paying jobs. Well, education today is in transformation. It's changing from the old reality of the way education used to look to a whole set of new realities. And the old realities were sort of born out of the industrial era between World War I and World War II, when folks were prepared to work in assembly lines at Chrysler, Ford, Boeing, and these kind of places. And they had a certain set of attributes. The first was, what was the environment they were preparing kids to go into? Well, the old reality prepared kids to go into the industrial age, to do things repeatedly, to be able to master facts, when, who, what, where. The focus was learning those same things, the whats, the whens, who did what, when did they do it. The structure was very centralized, so even today, the office building I work in, they call that the central office, because everything's sort of pointed like a pyramid to the top. The world doesn't look like that anymore. The world is all sorts of interconnections between different parts of the community, social networks together. The structure, non-competitive today. And the learning systems, they were very compartmented, sort of bite-sized. We had 6.8 hours in a day. We had 180 days in a year, and that was a school year. And before we had kindergarten, there was going to be 1 year through 12 years. Well, now we've added kindergarten, and now in Huntsville we've added pre-K. So kids don't live in little bite-sized pieces, though. They live in a continuous flow. They live in a world that's changing all the time, and it doesn't take a break for summer, it doesn't take a break for spring. It's always changing, and we need to be prepared for them to be ready for that. So what are we doing about it? We're getting ready for the new reality, which is already here. It's a world of information and concepts. Concepts like reinventing life. The folks over at Huntsville are working on the ability to change DNA, to attack diseases by recombining key components of DNA. How will our kids master that? And how will they think about it? Should we do it? Should we do it? There's ethical questions, moral questions, questions of life and the nature of life. We've got to do a lot more than what, who, and when to prepare kids for that. The outcomes, as I just said, they're changing. Not so much the when, the who, and the what. Now it's why and how. How would my business change if this new regulation was put in effect in Alabama? Why would they want to do that? Why would we change the nature of life? Those are the tough questions we're getting kids ready for now. And we're getting ready for them to figure those out on their own after they leave school. So we've got to give them the skills they need to master those sorts of questions while we have them. The structure, very decentralized. And you can see that today. Alabama struggles apparently every year with the question of what should education look like. Last year the debate was charter schools. This debate's about using public money to fund private schools. Next year, probably it'll be vouchers. But that education is changing rapidly, and public education has to be ready for that. And then finally, we need to be continuously operating to the benefit of your children. Education doesn't come in bite size. It comes when they're ready. It comes with prepared to answer questions they're interested in answering. And it should be available at all times, not just when they're in the classroom. So the other parts are, it has to be open. In the old days, schools were pretty much closed up. We weren't that interested in parents and community coming in. Now we are, and we need the help of parents. It's a partnership. And then finally, personalized. I guess if I'd asked in this room, how many people have the average child, I might not see a single hand. None of my children were the same. My guess is none of yours are the same. They're all different. And yet we approach them using that old industrial approach, like they were all coming off an assembly line. They're all going to take 12 years. They're all going to learn between September and June, and they're all going to learn on the same page, on the same day, in the same way. Of course, that's ridiculous. So our effort is now to personalize and understand your children better, so we can find out what gets them excited. What would they like to read? If they were to read this material, would they read it at a higher level? What sort of math would they enjoy? Would they like to see math in a finance format, talking about money? Or would they like to see it in an engineering format, talking about how to build something? That's the things we need to know to make sure your kids are excited about coming to school. Next. So here in Huntsville, when we're implementing all that, there's a set of things we're doing. The state and Huntsville City Schools are implementing our career and college ready standards, which include these common core standards that people who lead business and who run colleges tell us our kids need to know by the time they leave 12th grade. So that's the first major change. This year, this school system is entirely aligned with the college and career ready standards and the common core. That's a big change. We didn't want to wait 4 years because your kids aren't going to be able to wait. They get one shot at a great education. So we put it on our adults to speed up, to adopt these new standards and prepare your children to be ready for what comes in life. Here, we're focusing now more on growth than achievement. In the old days, if a teacher got a student who was maybe 2 grade levels behind or 3 grade levels behind, they might not want that student in their class simply because if they're graded on achievement and that student is not at grade level, by the end of that year, they would be marked down. Well, let's think about that. A teacher who can move a student 2 years in a year is doing heroic work. Why not recognize that? So now we do with a focus on student growth. So we're very interested in how fast are your children growing every year. And we want and require that they grow 1 year per year. And our expectation is they'll actually grow faster than that. And so we're changing everything to bring that into the view and make sure that's the case. We're doing it against a set of external standards. We could pick our own standards, and when we look at when we do use our own standards and how that works out for kids, it's not good. Our own standards are often encapsulated in report cards. Report cards go home to you. You'll see how your students do in math and science, but it may not tell you what you need to know about how will your student fare when they compete globally for a job. And so to take care of that, we're measuring all our kids against external standards. The same standards are going to be measured against when they go to work. So last year we looked at report cards across our middle schools, and we found out it didn't matter what middle school it was. The typical child, the median kids in that class, the middle child, got a B- to a B. When we looked at where they stacked up, though, in terms of their readiness for college and career, against other kids around the country, we had kids earning B's and B- that were at the 90th percentile. They were doing better than 90% of kids in the country. And we had kids that were doing better than 17% of kids in the country. That's not right for the kids, and that's not right for families. We have to be honest about how our children are doing. And so external standards help us do that. And we know our kids can more than match those external standards. But we have to shoot high, and we have to make sure we're aiming at the right things, which are being ready for college and career. The focus, we're very much focused now on college and career readiness. You hear me say that over and over tonight, and that's because it's where we're headed. It's where we're headed, and it's where we're aiming for your children to be prepared to dominate that arena. We're using advanced placement where we can, and so we're proud to be able to say that this year, Johnson High School is now part of A+ College Ready, which rewards students and teachers for their students who are in a 3, 4, or 5 on the AP exams to help them prepare for that. We're doing other things like bringing in curriculum in middle school so that they're prepared for high school AP courses. And then, of course, we're doing assessments. But we're doing it in a new way. The kids take their assessments on their computers. And that's so we can know instantly where are they. We don't need to send off the forms and wait weeks to find out. And so they can know instantly. And so that we don't have to waste a lot of time testing. Many of the tests we give now, the STAR test in particular, takes about 20 minutes, and we know exactly where a student is so we can begin putting the right resources in place. The structure, it's a little bit of the old, a little bit of the new, and it's going to become less and less of the old and more of the new over time. We anticipate it's going to take us about 4 to 6 years to complete this transformation from the way we do education to the way education must be. And then finally, the learning systems. We've made a lot of changes. We've brought in pre-K classrooms, so now we have 33 pre-kindergarten classrooms across our system. Most of those are funded, in fact, all but 2 are funded with local money. And so those are there to help make sure children have the skills they need to be ready to be reading by the end of 2nd grade and to be numerate by the end of 2nd grade. Because 2nd grade is a key time. That's when they stop learning how to read and start using reading to learn. And we've got to make sure they're ready for that transition. We're going to be doing a lot more project-based learning. So a lot of kids will say, I'll never use this math. Why would I need to know this? Well, if we embed it in projects, they'll understand why. So at Johnson High School, we're bringing Project Lead the Way, which is an engineering curriculum designed to bring together the math and the application in real life. And that ultimately should lead to a pretty good job on the arsenal. And then finally, the digital curriculum. So, what kind of results are we seeing so far? Well, typically, discipline problems in schools come from a couple places, but the most important is the children aren't engaged, they're disenfranchised, they're not connected to the curriculum. Somewhere we've lost them. And so now they're rebelling against school instead of being part of school. Well, the digital curriculum is helping re-engage them. We're approaching kids now where they live, in the digital environment. They're all natives to that environment. And when we do that, we see the discipline rates go down. And so this year we've seen discipline go down by about 45% across the school system. And our principals have told me what caused me to look at this was they actually approached me and said, Dr. Wardynski, the kids are engaged. The person I had working on discipline at Morris Elementary School, she's not doing that anymore. Or the person working at MLK on discipline, she's not doing that anymore. They're doing other things. On our buses, we put Wi-Fi on the buses for the longer routes, and we're seeing discipline on those routes go down 75% this year. So if we make education interesting and engaging, the kids will be with us. Next. What kind of results are we seeing in the classroom with regard to student preparation for college and career? Well, we're seeing pretty good results. This picture shows you year-over-year improvements in math, looking at all our elementary schools. So yellow was last year, and this graph shows what % of students in these schools were at or above grade level. The red bar shows this year at winter. So winter to winter, we see pretty good improvements here, and we seek to build on these and continue this progress. Next.
The children are actively engaged in their learning now, and I can get immediate feedback on their learning. So it's a huge benefit to the classroom.
I find that technology brings a sense of comfort for the students because this is who they are. This is what they know.
I love this. I liked it in the math book, but I actually like it even better on the laptop because I love technology so much.
It's so worth it because the children are really enjoying them, and I think it's going to even enhance their learning even more.
It's so much easier than using the textbooks, and it's so much easier than writing stuff down on paper.
It's really preparing them to be lifelong learners and to have those skills necessary, not just educational skills, but career skills and job skills.
In my workplace, all of my employees have laptops. We work remotely. We're able to email and access the internet instantly to find out what we need. And I think it's so important for students now to learn to work that way because that's the world now.
The benefits that we're going to receive not only from this day forward but for the years that we have following are really going to really enhance our kids' abilities out in the competitive world.
It is with great pleasure and with unanimous agreement that our external review team will recommend to Advance Ed and to the Advance Ed International Accreditation Commission that Huntsville City School be awarded district accreditation for an ensuing term of 5 years.
So, this year we've managed to become the first all-digital district accredited in Alabama, and we continue to build on that. We do it through strengthening our teaching faculty, and in this case, the focus is really on equity and excellence. When schools, in the old days, schools would hire their own teachers. The principal would do the recruiting, the principal would do the interviewing, and the principal ultimately would recommend the hires to the school board, to the superintendent. Well, when I began looking at our schools 2 years ago, it was fairly apparent that some schools had lots of applicants and some schools had virtually none. And in those cases where there were very few applicants, a principal might be reluctant not to advance a teacher on to tenure simply because he or she, the principal, might not get anybody to fill the hole if they didn't keep that teacher on board. Well, that's not a good situation. We need to make sure every school has access to the very best teachers and new talent to come into our schools. So the school system now recruits and hires all teachers for all of our schools. That makes sure we're all at a high level of quality, we're all at the same standard of excellence, and then what we do is we offer those teachers to the school principals 4 at a time for their consideration and their selection. So principals now pick from a list that is a list of teachers who are prepared to teach in any school in Huntsville City Schools. In fact, when they get hired out here, we have them agree to a set of affirmations. And key among those are, I believe every student can learn, and I'm willing to work in every school. So with that in mind, we now have 19,500 applicants for our schools, and we're thinking we're going to hire somewhere shy of 200 teachers this year. So that's a pretty good position to be in. Folks want to work in Huntsville City Schools. We also use information to make purposeful assignments of teachers to schools and to classrooms within schools. So this graphic's got a lot going on, but across the horizontal axis there you've got the elementary schools. And I've kind of highlighted with the little blue arrows the ones that would feed into Johnson High School in this area. And on the up-down axis, north-south, is how fast are the students growing. Down there below 40, where that red line is, those students in those classrooms, every dot being a classroom, are growing slower than a year. So the longer they're in classrooms like that, the further behind they will get. Well, that's not a good thing for our kids. So first thing that's important is, which classrooms are those? So the superintendent knows. And I've got the list of those classrooms on my desk. And I look at the files of the teachers, and I look at the teachers' data, and I look at the classroom data. The other folks in the school system also have those files on their desk. We've recommended that the teachers are leading those classrooms for summer learning labs. We're going to review their performance. If their performance hasn't improved, we'll make adjustments, with the idea that every child will be in a classroom where they're getting at least a year in a year, and in all likelihood much more than that. Now between those two red lines are classrooms where students are getting about a year in a year, and above the top red line are classrooms where students are getting more than a year of education in a year. And so you can see we've got schools like Morris, where there's a whole lot of dots above that red line. We've got a few below that we're working on, and then most are in the middle. So Morris is moving its teachers and its classrooms up, so all the students are getting more than a year of education in a year. You can see there's other schools there where most of the dots are above the top red line. That's where we want all our schools to be, all our classrooms. Every child needs to be in a high-growth environment. And so we're working diligently to make sure the teachers can deliver high-growth instruction, and then we have high-growth teachers in our classrooms. When we pick teachers, we score them, and we look at 10 different things. We look at their transcripts. Did this teacher who wants to teach math start out instruct in a math program and not do very well, and now they've changed to an education program? Okay, we're probably not going to hire that individual. Did they start on the math program and do well, and then switch to teaching? We're probably going to hire that individual for math. So we want folks where education was not a fallback position. It was the first thing they wanted to do, and they wanted to do it well. And so we look across the colleges we draw teachers from, and we score the colleges too. So we know which ponds to go fishing in, because we want big fish. And we want the biggest ones in our classroom. And so we're working on that as well. Now, we also want equity across our school system, and we want lots of applicants. So I mentioned a moment ago, we have 19,500 applicants to teach in Huntsville City Schools. And when we look at them, their breakout looks as shown on the pie chart on the left. And among the folks we actually hired last year, they look like the pie chart on the right. We hired 259 new teachers, and we have a pretty diverse group of excellent teachers here. Now, diversity is important because it's the way our country works. We need to be able to work with all sorts of folks, every walk of life. But it's also important because the district didn't always have a history of diversity. In the 1970s, the courts became involved with Huntsville City Schools and directed that we be treated as two school systems. And so they felt that the system was operated as two systems, where there was not equity for all the folks in the system, and particularly African American folks. Well, we're headed in a direction of unitary status because it's the right place to be. We need to treat everybody equally. We need to resource them equally. We need to make sure their schools are equivalent in excellence. And so we're on our way to doing that. The graph in the top has all our schools listed across the horizontal axis. And then on the up-down axis there is what percent of the population in that school is African American. So what the Department of Justice is interested in, do our schools generally look like our overall population of teachers? And in Huntsville City Schools, we have about 28% of our teachers are African American. So it would be odd to go to a school and find out that all the teachers are white or all the teachers are African American. But indeed, we have situations like that. And that's the two extremes of that chart. On the very far left, those schools, pretty much all the adults there are white. On the right, pretty much all the adults there are African American. Well, we've got to bridge that out, so it's about 30%, plus or minus 15%. So the graph on the bottom shows you where we are today. In 2 years, we've made a lot of progress, but we've got more progress to make. So we assign teachers purposefully to make sure they're excellent, that there are not grade level alignments of weak teachers, so that a student would go from a weak third grade to a weak fourth grade. And we're purposeful with regard to making sure we have equity across our school district and diversity. Thanks. And by way of developing the teachers we already have in Huntsville City Schools, of which many, many, many are excellent, we are providing now summer learning labs. And I think we have about 400 teachers enrolled in our summer learning lab, which will begin once school ends. And the focus of these labs is to improve teaching, to help teachers make that jump from the old way of teaching to the new college and career ready standards, and to use the digital resources our kids have, but maybe not all our adults are here. And so we'll be providing that this summer. And then during the school year, this year we began providing 30 days of training in our classrooms in every school. So we've now brought professional development into our schools to help our teachers with that career and college ready standard component, as well as the digital business, and helping them learn how to master the digital resources we provide. Now, to help our kids get ready, while we're getting our teachers ready, we expanded pre-K. So the district is now investing about $2 million a year in pre-K, and we have some schools with up to 2, 3, and 4 pre-K classrooms in that. These are designed to meet the needs of the community and the students to make sure those students are ready to move on and be able to go from learning how to read to reading to learn by 2nd grade. With that effort, we're able to provide 414 additional students access to pre-K, and this is very high quality pre-K. The teacher is certified in early childhood education, and in most cases, the aide is a certified teacher as well. And I think we have about 18 students in those classrooms. So 2 adults, 18 students, lots of certified adults that know exactly what they need to do to help those children get ready for the future of education. And that gives us the ability to provide 60% of our children today access to pre-K who would otherwise be at risk if we didn't.
Pre-K is vital to a child's education, mainly because we start early. We teach them the basics of school. They learn routine, they learn schedule, and then luckily in Huntsville City we get to incorporate curriculum, and we get to go ahead and start teaching them those fundamental things that they'll start learning in kindergarten.
I know what ABCs. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. When we lock the books. cat and dog go to school? I'm 5 and I'm smarter than a 5th grader.
Pre-K kids are getting spun up. We're also working in our high schools to make sure our kids are on track. And so this year, Huntsville City Schools introduced 12 assessments, which the state of Alabama will phase in over the next 4 years. So these assessments replace the Alabama High School graduation exam. And they're in the area of math, 4 components: Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, and Pre-Calculus. U.S. History. English has 4 components, and then 3 components of science: chemistry, physics, and biology. The students take these exams on their computers, 45 minutes, then a 10-minute break, then 45 minutes, and then they get the results. And that way we know, while they're still in their current grade level, exactly how we did, and what we need to revisit, and where we can accelerate. So with that, we look at the results. So this chart shows across the x-axis, or the horizontal line there, the scores our children earn. And a score of about 48 there would be equivalent of college ready. So that would be somewhere near 22 on the ACT. And that's what we hope our children are going to attain on the ACT. But we don't really have to hope anymore, because with these assessments, we now have a really good prediction that they will. And so each of those dotted lines is a different high school. And if we pick one, let me pick the lowest one there, that's Huntsville High School. Where that crosses that up-down red bar at 48, if we read to the left, it says about 25%. What that means is 25% of the children in that school who took the Algebra 2 exam still have some work to do to be college ready. 75% are college ready. So in our other schools, we have some work to do. So the old Alabama High School graduation exam told us that most of our kids were ready to go. In fact, we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that their first year of college isn't a year where mom and dad get to spend money reteaching math, reteaching literature and literacy, and things we already should have covered in high school. So these tests are critical to helping us drive instruction forward, make sure that in the classrooms, teachers are actually teaching things that are critical skills that your students need to master. So we've got some work to do. There's some discussion in the press too about these standards. There was folks that were saying, well, Common Core, common isn't so good, right? We want exceptional or something like that. Well, common doesn't mean low or ordinary. Common means the same across the United States. Children in Alabama ought to be prepared with the same standards as they are in New York or Massachusetts or California, and that's a high standard. Well, these are the kind of things our children need to be able to do on that Algebra 2 exam. These don't look so low to me. Use the law of sines and cosines, convert between logarithmic and exponential equations. Lots of stuff in here that's fairly complex. So this means we're getting them ready when we do these sorts of things, and we've got a lot of work to do. Thanks. What does the results look like? Well, this is the results for an actual student here at this high school. And what we see here is on the top, there's a blue bar, and the blue bar says 96. And underneath is another bar that I think says 69. That means that in this school, that student scored better than 96% of children taking the Algebra 2 test. Nationally, this child scored better than 69% of children taking the Algebra 2 test. So this is the difference between internal standards and external standards. Your children are going to compete against the rest of the kids in the country for jobs, and we want to get that 69 up. We want that to be a high score. Well, you can look down inside there in that little pink area under 22. That tells us this child is college ready. So this child most likely will not need to remediate in college. They'll get an ACT score that's indicative of that when they take the ACT in another year. And then down there, those green bars tell us how many questions did they get right in those key areas, which I have on that slide we just looked at. And so that lets us guide instruction and make sure that we're not teaching just the beginning of the textbook. We're teaching all the stuff we need to teach. Thanks. So, while we're working on our teaching faculty, and we're laying the foundation for pre-K, and we're connecting our kids up using digital technology, we still work in buildings. And when we look at our buildings, we've got a lot of work to do there as well. Huntsville sort of grew up from north to south, and many of these buildings in the north, it's time to replace them. Some of them are 50, 60 years old. And when you look at them, the way they're laid out is not suitable any longer for educational purposes. And that becomes more true as we go up the grade level. So Chemistry labs, are they laid out properly? Physics labs, do they have a space for career readiness? Could we teach robotics? Is the school the right size for the student body? Is the school efficient for its use? Or are we spending a ton of money on air conditioning because the air conditioning plant's not really good? So those are the key questions we're looking at. When we do it, we've got some guiding principles to figure out what to do about it, and the answer is no. These are to recapitalize, right size, and make sure the schools are in the right place. And right size and the right place are the keys. So when we look at our schools on the ground, are they located where the kids can get to them easily? Are they sort of in the center of where all the students will come from enrollment room? And are they too big or too small for the number of students who would like to attend that school? When we look at them, we also want to make sure we're using the same recipe. That there's not a different recipe with more sugar and more chocolate or more candy or whatever we like out west or out east. But it's all the same wherever we go. And so that was the idea of programming. So this year we brought in members of the community, members of civic leaders, teachers, principals, students, to discuss programming and what our schools ought to look like. Where should the gym be vis-a-vis the cafeteria? And where should the counselors be with regard to the principal? And how big should a classroom be in high school? And what programs do we want in our high schools? And we all agreed on that recipe. Now we take that recipe and we decide whether we're making a square cake, 3-layer cake, 1-layer cake, or whatever. But it's going to be to the same recipe. The enrollment, that's key. If we're going to right size our school system and our schools, we've got to know how many kids are going to go to those schools. I mentioned a moment ago that in days gone by, we had 36,000 students in the school system. Today we've got 24,000. People just aren't having babies as many as they used to. And many folks in this town aren't having babies at all because they're a little older. Enrollment and facility planning. Enrollment and facility planning. This is the business of lining all these things up so it all makes sense. The number of students, what's inside the school, how the school looks. So when we do that, first we had to develop an enrollment and facility plan. And we brought in a lot of consultants to help us do that because it's pretty complex work. And they look at Huntsville and they give the city planners and they decide to focus on what areas of the town have yet to be built out, when are they likely to be built out, what kind of homes or multifamily homes are going to go in there, and what's the price point going to be, and for the folks that are likely to move in there, are they likely to have kids, are they likely to be beyond those years when they're having kids, and how many kids are they likely to have? Those are all the questions that was supposed to answer for us. While we're doing that, we want to get a good alignment. We want a child to know in elementary school, which high school am I going to go to? Which team should I root for? Which school ought I start the community and team spirit for? And so that's an important question, and we can't trace that path for many of our students today. So as we move forward, we want to be able to build a path they can trace. And as we right size and match likely enrollments, we want to do it in a way where kids can still walk to those elementary schools. Having local elementary schools is a pretty good thing for keeping parents connected and building community support. So our focus is on making sure the elementary schools are in the right place and by and large they're okay. But really spending our money on those secondary schools. Because in education, elementaries really aren't that complex. Classrooms, cafeteria, offices, some sort of a library. And that's the gamut. But high schools are really complex. Gymnasiums, theaters, chemistry, physics, career readiness, counselors, all sorts of things, and they need to be the right size and in the right place. So here's what the monitors have told us. When we look at the map on the left, we can see population growth from 2011, looking forward about 5 years, and areas of high growth would be to the west, and that's basically it. When we look to how many students we're going to see coming into our schools, that's the map on the right, and there we're seeing a little bit more growth in a couple other places. To the west, there in the red circle, to the northwest in the red circle, and to the southeast in the red circle. Other than that, we're not anticipating much enrollment growth at all. When we look at North Huntsville, we see to the left there a little bit of growth over in the Providence area, and a little bit of growth right in the Goldsmith Shipman area, and then down in the Williamsville area. But here in the center of the city, the south of the city, and the north of the city, we do not see much enrollment growth. Well, that's important news, because we have a lot of square footage in a lot of those places, and a lot of it may not be needed. This picture tells us of the growth we get, how many will come from multifamily homes, How many kids will come from single-family homes? And how many kids will those homes produce? And what we're finding is it's about 20 kids per 100 homes. So that's not a lot of new children coming into the system. And that's up there in the blue. The blues and the light blues are those 20 kids per 100 home situations. So when we look back over the last period of time, we can see enrollment, births here in Huntsville have been fairly level. While the city grew, the number of children being born here in Huntsville Hospital and Crestwood and other places really hasn't increased at all. And it's recovered there around 2,000 to 2,200 a year. And when we look at the enrollments that have come over that period of time, those have been pretty level too. Somewhere from 22,000 to 23,000 over that period of time. So pretty steady. And then looking forward, we see that we're likely to get to about 25,000 students in 10 years. So that's 1,300 more than we have today. 1,300 more, but we still have space for about 36,000, 32,000, something like that. When we look school by school, and I've kind of indicated here in arrows underneath the school names which ones would feed into this part of our town. This is how many new students we'd see in those schools over the next 10 years. So if we look up at Davis Hills, maybe another 20 students in 10 years. And if we look over to the right to our high schools, Johnson High School, maybe another 15 students over the next 20 years. That's not a lot of growth. And even where it looks like there's a lot of growth, Whitesburg and Williams, we're talking an additional 70 to 80 students over the next 10 years. So that says we probably have about the enrollments we're going to have for the foreseeable future. Now that could change if some gigantic business came to town, but that would likely lead to growth in a certain part of town, and we'd have to account for that when it happened. So, given that information, we've got some priorities. We want to make sure our schools are right-sized, they're in the right place. As we do that, we've got some schools that are very important to our system, ASFL and AAA, two of the schools. We want to make sure they're in the right place and that they're in a condition to continue to grow. Right now, AAA has a backlog of about 1,000 students, and it can't grow in its existing facility. Right now, ASFL is about at capacity, and the program it lines up with, Columbia, its students can't go to unless they have to live in Columbia's footprint. So we need to make sure that things that were put in place in 1984, as the city's changed and enrollments have changed and our town has changed, that they're still working as they should for us in the present and into the future. So we've got a very ambitious plan, and thanks to our mayor and our city fathers and the council, we're in a position to execute it. We envision $194 million of construction. While we have about 20% of our students here in North Huntsville, we anticipate spending 40% of this money on the schools in North Huntsville. And that's because those schools are the old schools and most in need of updates and replacement. With this money, by 2016, we plan to build 2 new high schools, 1 freshman academy, 1 junior high school, 1 P8 school, and 2 elementary schools. And when we're done, we will take 1.8 million square feet, and we have about 4.2 million square feet of space. We'll take 1.8 million of that square footage and replace it with, those are old schools, and replace that square footage with 1.1 million square feet of new schools. So for those who are good at math, that means we're getting rid of 700,000 square feet. And that's square footage that we're heating, security, cleaning, air conditioning, that we don't need. Once we're done, we'll be able to relocate 27% of our students into new schools. And that will either alleviate a problem of schools that are too big or in the wrong place, or in some cases, schools that are currently overcrowded. With that 700,000 square feet that we eliminate, that's 20% of our system right there. That 20% of the money we spend on our buildings today is wasted because we don't need that space. And that space we're going to eliminate has an average age of 48 years. And when we bring on the new square footage, that age is going to, across the entire system, go from 43 years down to 24 years in age. And achieve a savings for us of about $5 million a year because we're not going to be heating space we don't need. Now, since 2011, we've already begun consolidating schools, and we've done in a way a lot of folks didn't notice because we don't like to disrupt communities and upset children's education. So we've already consolidated Chapman Elementary Middle. We've already consolidated Mountain Gap, Whitesburg, Providence Middle, Williams, and we've closed the homebound school. So a great deal has already been accomplished. We've gone from somewhere around 46 schools now down to about 42. When we look at the number of children in our city, as we think about, could children come back from private school or parochial school? Well, that's an important question, so we actually know the answer. We survey all the schools in our area, and we ask them, where are your students from and what grade are they in? And what we find is 92% of the children in Huntsville attend Huntsville City Schools. And of those that don't, if they came back to our school system, you could see we'd add another 1.1 if they came back in the Columbia feeder pattern area. If they came back in the Johnson feeder pattern area, we'd add about 0.5%. So not a lot of kids could come back to our schools and occupy that space that's currently empty. And we're doing pretty doggone good. Most of our kids are in our public schools. Now, turning more locally, looking at Johnson and its feeder pattern schools, the students at Ed White occupy a building that's quite old. When it was built, it was pretty doggone near full. And by 1974, it had about 1,200 students. Today it has 460. That's about a third of what that building will hold. So we're heating 2/3 of the space for children that don't exist, who don't need to be in that school because they will never be in that school. And that money could have been better spent on the children's education. And you can see what we've highlighted here is the purple star is where Johnson High School currently is located relative to the students that attend Davis Hills, and those students are all those white dots. And the red star is a location that we think might be more central to those students. Thanks. This is our other students. I said Davis Hills on the other one, it was Ed White. This is Davis Hills students. And you can see where the current Johnson High School is located, and it's at the very top there of all those dots. There are very few children, if any, north of there. And Davis Hills is well south. And so the proposed location we're thinking of for a better location to support the students in this area would be where the red star is. And again, when Davis Hills was in operation at its heyday, it had 1,700 students. Today they're 396. So a big change, and one we need to take account of. And finally, Johnson High School. So Johnson here, these are all Johnson students, the white dots. Johnson's the purple star, and the red star would be a location that's more central for its students. When Johnson was in its heyday, 1974, it had 2,088 students. Today, 580. Well, a building that has changed, a building population that's changed that much is important for a variety of reasons. One, we're spending a lot of money on heating space we don't need, but two, for 580 students, we've got about a quarter of the number of students the school, the quarter number of the adults the school is built for. And the reason I say adults is, we get adults in relationship to how many children. So 2,000 students probably would have led to a teacher population that was about 1/20th of that. It was 100 to 120 teachers. Today we've got 580 students and a teacher population that's somewhere around 1/20th of that. Well, those teachers can't supervise all this space properly. And it leads to problems with discipline, and leads the superintendent to be pretty worried about student safety. And so, in my mind, the right sizing of these schools is of critical importance for supervision and safety. Here I've given you a little different view. So the purple star is the current school location. The yellow star is a piece of land we have where I am. The white dots are Johnson students. The red circle is students within 2 miles. And you can see that 2-mile circle extends over a lot of land where there's no kids. If we move south a mile, now the yellow circle extends over areas where mostly we have kids. And that will greatly improve the ability of students to get to school and put the school in more of a central location. There on the right, we're highlighting where the school is today in pink. Rolling Hills is just south, and then the proposed site is just south of that. So about a mile south here on Pulaski between Springfield and Winchester. The piece of land looks like this. It's 55 acres, plus or minus. We're still getting it surveyed. And it would be, the students would enter, and the folks would enter the campus from Pulaski Pike, there on the left. And the way the schools might lay down on it. This is one artist rendering of how the schools might lay down. So 7th and 8th grade in junior high, adjacent to the high school. And the high school would contain the 9th grade academy. And we're having great success with our 9th grade academies. The number of failures in our 9th grade academies is down pretty significantly compared to last year without 9th grade academies. Another rendering would be Plan B. And here the 2 grade level groups would be separate. And then finally Plan C. And what this does for us is in Alabama, in most states, Grades 7 through 12 is a secondary certification for our teachers. So our teachers are certified to teach grades 7 through 12, and our elementary teachers teach grades 6 and below. Well, with 7th and 8th grader close to the high school, this would allow us more flexibility to bring programs into the junior high and, quite frankly, into the high school too, because our teachers would be able to cover a wider grade span. So this would help with laying the foundation, which is our preparatory courses for AP in the high schools. It would help with Project Lead the Way and bringing engineering into the middle school, the middle year program. And it helps build a common culture. So we want our students at Enter Johnson all to have a common frame of mind about what is this school about? What's my role in this school? How am I going to act while I'm here? What is my goal? And we want to create that culture as a cohesive element and not break it up just because it was convenient for the adults to divide things up, elementary, middle, and high. This will also allow the extracurriculars to build rapport with the middle school, or the 7th and 8th grade. It'll build team spirit, so we can envision across our system, coaches are always coming to me saying, I'd love to have more to say about how that middle school is preparing those football players, or that band, or that choral group. Well, here, that would be much easier to do. So students would be better positioned to dominate those extracurricular activities, as well as the academic activities. What would be in the new school? Well, some of our newest career academies. So we're looking at industrial robotics, and that's with an idea in mind that pretty close north here, we've got a factory full of robots that need to be maintained. Those are good paying jobs. This campus, through the work of our city council and our mayor, would be transitioned from a school system use to an academy for the National Guard, as well as police and fire academy for training our local police and fire departments. Well, for that reason, we see a natural alignment between our new high school and this campus, so that students who can enter the police and fire departments with a high school diploma would be able to get some experience with the training academies that would be here. Project Lead the Way, that's an engineering academy, which would be bringing in Johnson with a focus on preparing students to work in the high-tech industries here in Huntsville. Aesthetics and spa management is a fancy way of upgrading from barbering and cosmetology to careers that have much bigger tips and better salaries. And then finally, business management to prepare folks to lead businesses here in our county. So to expand on all this, I've mentioned a couple times now a program called Laying the Foundation. The purpose of that is to help students prepare for AP courses in high school. And the reason AP or advanced placement courses are important is A, it's got more rigor, it prepares your children better for career and college readiness. 2, if they get a 3, 4, or 5 on their AP exams, that's a course they don't have to take in college, which mom and dad don't have to pay for, which is a good thing. So how do we get them ready for that? Well, we get them ready earlier, just like we do in pre-K, getting kids ready earlier. And we'll do that in 7th and 8th grade with Laying the Foundation, which our teachers are already training for. The STEM programs, we're going to continue to advance STEM. Science, technology, engineering, and math are key components of being career ready in Huntsville, and we want to make sure students across our system are ready. And then finally, we're pushing STEM down into our elementary schools. The first time children see those components, science, technology, engineering, and math, shouldn't be when they get to middle or high school. What kind of results are we seeing here? Well, AP enrollments are up. So when we look at enrollments, that's on the left. The red bar is 2 years ago, yellow bar a year ago, and then the green bar is this year. When we look at exams taken, we're seeing increased exam taking, and we're going to be looking at that here in the coming week because we have our exams ongoing. And then qualifying scores, those 3, 4, and 5s, the number of students earning that is going up as well. And to help with that, here at Johnson, and we've also just added Butler High School, are part of the A+ College Ready program. When a student gets a 3, 4, or 5, the student gets a check. When the student gets a 3, 4, 5, the teacher gets a check. Plus we get training. So that is all pretty good. Graduation rates. We've seen our graduation rate year over year go from 66% to 77%. We've got a lot of work to do. We need to get the graduation rate up in several of our schools in the 80s, 90s, and 100% range. And so to do that, I have conducted a search that's yielded a principal and a team to come into Johnson High School in the coming year. They'll be coming here in July. That principal and team in high school in Tennessee, they have about 700 students, 90% poverty. Free and reduced rate is about 90%. And they moved that school from a 59% graduation rate in 4 years to 91% graduation rate. And so they visited this weekend. It was my pleasure to tour them of the school. Barbara Coop and I were here along with Laura McCauley, and they're ready to come and take Johnson into this new future. So we've also got other efforts ongoing to make sure our schools are working for our kids. We've got some schools that have become known as failing schools, persistently failing schools. One of those was West Lawn Middle School. When the board interviewed me for this position, their homework assignment to all the superintendent candidates was what can we do to improve education at West Lawn? And the answer to that question is to be found there today. West Lawn students are moving at about 18 months to 2 years of progress in a year. And this graphic shows you, here on the horizontal axis, from left to right, we've got how fast are students growing. And further right is good. The right of that middle bar there means growing more than a year in a year, and a lot more than a year in a year. Up and down is what's their achievement, what percent of the students are proficient at grade level. And there we want the kids north. So last year, West Lawn was at orange hexagon, and this year they are at the blue bubble there with the arrow pointing at it. So they've moved a great deal in only a part of the year, and this data is about 3 months old. And that's in math, and here's West Lawn reading. So we know all our children can learn. At West Lawn they are. A great deal has been achieved in a short period of time. Now we did it through some pretty significant efforts. We have new school leadership. We replaced the vast majority of the adults in that school and brought in adults who believe every child can learn and are willing to do what it takes to make sure that they do. We're looking to extend that approach to all of our schools that are delivering for our children. And we'll be doing that here in Johnson. Next. Now, kids can't be ready to learn if they don't have the energy they need to take on the day of learning. And last year, when we looked, 2 years ago when I arrived, I looked at the breakfast participation rates in our schools and found that, not surprisingly, only about a third of our kids were eating breakfast. And the reason only a third eat is schools were built for lunch. Back when these buildings were built, we did 3 feedings of lunch and nobody served breakfast. So the design here doesn't support one feeding of breakfast. And it's hard to get kids to come in early to eat breakfast. So rather than moving the kids to the food in the cafeteria, we now move the food to the kids in the classroom and feed them all. So we've gone from 3 schools to 13 schools having breakfast in the classroom, and participation rates, in other words, kids eating breakfast, has gone from about 30 or 40% up into 90%. That's reduced tardies, it's reduced the number of trips to the nurse for students who are hungry, and it's increased students' readiness to learn. We're going to continue to expand that program into our middle and high school.
Breakfast in the classroom is a program that started by Dr. Wardynski back in the spring of this past school year. It initially started in 2 schools and has since expanded to 13 schools. National studies have shown that students who eat breakfast tend to have higher test scores, less truancy problems, and less discipline issues. And we're starting to see the benefits of some of those already.
We are starting to see the children get into the academics the way that we want them to.
But if you don't eat breakfast, you can't make good grades and then you get F's.
They even will get here early and say, we didn't miss breakfast, did we?
If you don't eat breakfast, you probably fall asleep in class and get in trouble. Because I know how to do my work faster without stopping in the middle of class and my stomach hurt. Because they do say breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
So they are just genuinely happier to be coming to school. They look forward to having that breakfast in the morning.
To build on that program and to recognize the simple fact that even while our children are in school, they need breakfast and lunch and dinner, and they may not always have a chance to get that when school's not in session, we're bringing online for the first time in Huntsville a summer feeding program. So at 12 different schools, we'll be offering a program where they can have breakfast and lunch, and then at 2 schools, dinner. And the dinners are situated so that they're central to where they can get breakfast and lunch. And so any child 18 and under, whether they go to our schools, a parochial school, private school, can come into our schools in the summer. This goes on in June and July, and have a free meal. And an adult who accompanies them can have a meal too, and lunch and dinner costs $4 for the adults, and it's $2.50 for breakfast. Now this program has been around since 1968, and it's paid for by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So it's high time we make sure all our kids have what they need during the summer, so they're ready for school start in August. So, things we're doing to improve our schools. These are just some of the highlights of things that have begun in the last 2 years. I spoke about pre-K, and we've added 23 pre-K classrooms so that we now have 33. We're creating freshman academies, and the academies we have, we're seeing a lot better performance in terms of students succeeding in class and not failing. It's critical that students not fail freshman year, because a failure, one F, is very likely to lead to a dropout. So the freshman academies are critical to making sure our students succeed in high school. And we'll be adding a freshman academy to Johnson in the coming year. We provide every student with educational technology so they always can be connected to their curriculum. And they can have the expertise they need to go on into business and into college. We began turning around 2 failing schools, West Lawn and Dawson. We secured $9 million worth of grants to do that. So that's $9 million of new resources over the next 3 years to turn those schools around. We've strengthened teacher review and teacher hiring to make sure we've got excellent teachers in our classrooms. We've begun summer learning labs to make sure our teachers have the professional development they need year-round. We've begun a partnership with Teach for America, which is approximately half the faculty at West Lawn now, which those new teachers are doing a great job in helping provide an excellent education in that school. We've implemented system-wide assessments every 9 weeks, so we know where your children are all year long, and we know that we need to do something, and we know when your children can speed up. We're implementing the quality core curriculum. Talked about that just a little bit ago. The state of Alabama will be doing that over the next 4 years. And we've enrolled Johnson and Butler High Schools in A+ College Ready to make sure students here have access to AP courses and the rigor that comes with it. And finally, we've got a capital strategy to make sure we can replace our oldest schools with great new learning facilities matched to the needs of the community. And we've added some key feeding programs and other resources to make sure our students are ready to begin learning at the start of the day and that they don't lose ground during the summer. All right. So thank you for your attention. I think somebody's collected cards that we have questions on.
If you have the cards, go on them up and we'll collect them, and to get started, we already have some questions. If you want to start with those, while we collect some more.
All right. So why is the reason that Johnson's not being built on the current location? I think I've covered that, but the key considerations are where would be the best location for students? And when we look at where the students are and where they live, this is not the best location. This is about as far away, while still being near the students, that you would get from being at the center of where the students are. And so we want to make sure the school is conveniently located. And because the city is undertaking to repurpose this facility, we can make sure we don't leave a gap behind when we move to a new facility. That's going to be a rare point in time when we can achieve that feat. As you may know, when you wander around town, you'll see Stone Middle School and other schools that are still looking for buyers. Well, we're able to provide a buyer today for this facility as we provide a new facility in the right place for children for tomorrow. Let's see here. For the high school, 9th grade academy, and middle school on the proposed new campus, how will it still be managed? So we envision 2 leadership teams, one for the junior high, 7th and 8th grade, and one for the high school. And the high school administrator would likely have purview over the entire campus as well. And there the idea is to create an alignment so as those kids move from one building to the other, when they go from 8th grade to 9th grade, it's a seamless transition and they don't fall through any cracks. Right now, when you go from the world of middle years instruction to high school, it's a pretty big difference. You go from a world that's pretty well controlled to a world in which you're expected as a young adult to be in charge of your activities during that day. And if you're not ready for that, you'll fall through a crack. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen, and we've got a good alignment. What is the plan for the current high school faculty facility once the new school has been completed? So I spoke about that a moment ago. The city of Huntsville is looking to acquire the existing campus and repurpose it for a training facility for the National Guard, the fire department, and the police department. And so we'll continue to contribute to this part of town. In fact, it'll probably bring a lot of economic activity to this part of town. That would be great for folks, businesses, and great for students as they are able to come back here and participate in that police and fire academy. Let's see, has a traffic study been done to prevent the same issue that we had with traffic during the drop-off and pickup times? Yes, we're currently studying we studied several pieces of land, and we undertook traffic studies at the cursory ones at a variety of those, and then a focused traffic study, the one we're looking at most closely. And we're also looking at air quality, water, soil, and a whole host of other factors that go into making a site selection. Let's see. What's being done to improve academics at the schools in North Huntsville? So that was sort of that list of things that I just covered. And it's pretty comprehensive. So it's everything from the teachers, to the leadership, to the technology, to the facilities, to the nutrition programs, to how we measure student success along the way during the year. And so there's a lot going on. Well, Johnson High School, we restarted similar to this one in 2013. We're looking to make some pretty substantial changes at Johnson High School. I'm not happy with the graduation rates. I think the students here can do much, much better, and the adults need to be in a position to prepare them for that. We need to advance the rigor, more advanced placement courses, more engineering, things that lead to high-wage jobs. And so we've got a lot of work to do at several of our high schools, and this is one of them. Will the smaller building also mean watered-down academic offerings? Well, no, actually, it'll mean better academic offerings. So we're spending a lot of money on things we don't need, like space. We can take that money and repurpose it into things we do need, like better programs for our kids. And we envision that when we're done, the enrollment of the new high school will be somewhere in the area of 1,000 students, and the junior high will be somewhere in the area of 700 students. So with those size student bodies, we can offer really great academic programs and extracurricular programs. And students in those schools will be in the same position as students in our other high schools with larger enrollments are in. My handwriting is actually better than this, which is hard to believe. Okay, I think this question says, why not put better teachers in Johnson if you know that's what you need to do? Well, here's how staffing works. In Alabama, every employee for the school system, except for the chief financial officer and the superintendent, gain tenure after 3 years. So our cooks, our mechanics, our custodians, everybody's got tenure. And so that creates a situation in which if folks aren't performing as we desire, it takes a fairly exhaustive amount of work to remove them from the position. Now, while I've been superintendent, we've removed a lot of folks. We did a lot of work at West Lawn, and we're getting ready to do a lot of work elsewhere. And in the old days, education was all about compliance. Did we obey the rules? That's not going to work anymore. Education's got to be about performance, just like the businesses you work in. If your business is not performing, it's going to go bankrupt, and it's going to go away. Well, education needs to perform for our kids, and so that's part of the reason for all the assessments, all the technology, is we now have a much better idea how we're performing, and classrooms that aren't, we're going to work to make changes. Let's see. Will we go back to going to school in your district only? Not sure what that means. No, this says students go out of district. As we move from being a dual school system to a unitary school system, a lot of things we're doing today won't carry into the future. So you're familiar with the transfer students that move across our town. Once we're a unitary status, that will become illegal. The only reason it's allowed today is because of the dual status of the school system. So that would be something we want to make sure that all of our students have great schools to go to, because that option of transferring would go away. And they need to be able to have an excellent experience in their own area of the city. They shouldn't have to travel an hour and a half to get to one. Okay. What's our plan for okay. So Martin Luther King Elementary School is one of the schools I mentioned. There'll be 2 new elementary schools. Martin Luther King will be one of those new elementary schools in our plan. And so that will begin. We have engineering drawings underway, and that will be a school we begin in the coming years. Let's see. That looks like a teacher question. When can we expect these mergers to take place? That's the part I can't talk about. So I've told you everything I can about the schools, and so we're in discussion with the U.S. Department of Justice and the NAACP Defense Fund, and the things I can share, I've shared, and the things I can't, I can't. And so the timing of all this is subject to a continuing discussion. Ideally, and you can probably get from this discussion, but I think sooner would be better than later, simply because we're spending a lot of money on buildings that are way oversized for our kids. That makes it difficult to supervise. Those children in buildings where we're heating a lot of space when we could have been educating instead. And those facilities aren't really in very good shape, and they're going to need a lot of maintenance. So sooner is better than later in my work. Let's see. Very concerned about future use of land. I'm assuming we're talking about this school, and so we work closely with Mayor Battle and the city government to make sure this land doesn't lie fallow, but is used for community purposes after we're gone. We've been told the city schools will be rezoned. What impact will this have on your plan? Well, there's some specifics that I can't go into, but in shaping a plan for the future, we want to make sure that if a student, we currently go to a pattern of schools, that we wouldn't move them across town to do that. So if a student would currently come to this high school, our plan would be they'd continue to come to this high school. If they were going to go to Columbia, they'd go to Columbia. So the zoning people may have in mind is not all that significant. And that's probably all I can say on that. Let's see. Okay. If this new structure for middle school and high school is so excellent, why not Grissom too? That's another straightforward question, and it has a straightforward answer. As the city moved, as you look around in North Huntsville, the elementary schools are in one place and the middle schools are in another place. As you go west and you go south, the middle schools and the elementary schools are actually banged up against each other, and they may be actually joined in many places. Those buildings, the way those buildings are laid out, lend themselves to a P8 structure. Since we can work from white paper, a whole new design with these schools, we can do a design that's actually lines up better with the way our facilities operate. 7 through 12 is a secondary certificate for our teachers. We don't add an elementary grade into the middle of that, requiring teachers to come with those expertise in that building and not have any students. When we have that situation, our teachers spend a lot of time driving around town. So we have a half unit here, a half unit there, and that wastes time, wastes money. And what we'd rather have is the alignment so that 7 to 12, which is all about the secondary experience being together, and the elementary years being together. And so, just so happens when people were building schools in the 50s and 60s, here in North Huntsville, the elementaries are by themselves and the middles are somewhere else. So it lends itself to a design that's 7 through 12. In the South, it's pre-K through 8, and then 9, 10, 11, 12. And since Grissom has supporting middle schools already, we don't have money to replace them. We can spend the money replacing them, or we can spend the money where it needs to be spent in North Huntsville, replacing really old schools with the right sort of schools and new schools. There'll be an existing, how many new P8s will there be? We have an existing P8 school that will be replaced. It was also built in the 50s. And so it feeds into Grissom, and that's Whitesburg. That's it. So I thank you very much for coming tonight. Really appreciate the community engagement. Please stay engaged with us as we move into the future.